All right, guys, another little tech tip that I do that I'll share. So when you're putting in a new pilot bushing, one of the things I like to do, and I know some people make fun of me, so in my freezer, pardon the booze, but I always keep my pilot bushings in the freezer, so that way when you go to put them in, they're contracted a little bit. Just like the concept, you know, heating up metal. Well, the opposite is true for cooling metal. So I put mine, and this is the first time I've run one of these longer ones, but I put it in the freezer right before I install it. So now that it's good and cold, and it's been in there for a few days, I come over here, and I got my puller set. It's a puller, but I use it for installing. So basically, it's a harmonic balancer puller. Instead of using the bolts that come with it, just find some. They're 7/16, I think by 20, but they're a fine threaded bolt. And so basically, get you set up here. Basically, get it set up. Kind of start your bushing. And then, this is going to be a pain on the butt, I think. Get you can use a socket. This is a piece of pipe that I had laying around. But you get that started. And it usually takes 6 hands to hold all of it. Basically get it started. So, and then basically once you get it started, you don't want to dilly-dally too much, but basically you can kind of watch as I crank this puller down. It pushes that bushing in, and you just want to push it in. Like this one's got a step on it, so you just push it in until it stops, and then you don't have to worry about dinging it or denting with a hammer. So it's just something that I found works really nice. It even works with the standard pilot bushings. Get down here so I can see what I'm doing, but basically, yeah, you just push it in, so it's a lot easier on the pilot bushing since they're just kind of a bronze type alloy. And you just want to be careful when you're pushing it in. You're going to get to a point where it should bottom out on that step. And I think that's it right there. So basically that's all she wrote, and then just pull everything back out. Should fall down, fall out of there. Take your bolts out, and they just can be hand tight. They don't have to be anything wild. You don't have to put them in there. I think there's a 3-inch long 7/16 fine, so they're a little bit odd. You might have to go to a hardware store or something and grab them. And then just like this harmonic balancer puller is just something that I just flip it around and use it. This one comes with a point on it. My last one just had kind of a blunt edge to it. I've used sockets before as my spacer. Like I said, this just is a piece of like 1-inch tubing, thick wall. Make sure it's good square cut. I do like the point on this. It helps center it, so that helps. And then like this one just takes a 3/4 inch wrench, so I use a ratchet wrench. Makes it easier. You can use a socket. I would highly avoid using like an impact, but yeah, I'll have to double check that real quick, but it should be fully seated in there. You don't have to worry about hitting with a hammer, dinging the crankshaft, denting up that you can. There's hardly any scuffs on there. If anything, there's a little paint from the end of my deal, but there, you can't see there's any damage. It looks pretty much brand new, just like it was when I pulled it out. So I'm gonna go ahead and check that just to make sure it's seated properly. Other than that, yeah, easy peasy. And it helps reduce the chances of, like I said, damaging anything. Just a little thing that I think I've found people commented on Facebook, or not Facebook, YouTube, and showing how it's done. Just something that I found works really slick. Got a couple guys in town that have borrowed my puller like that to do it, and it seems to work really nice, and people really like doing that. Do you have to freeze your bushings? Probably not. It worked the first time. I'm just going to keep doing it that way for me. And like I said, this is the first time I'm using a longer bushing. Just with us running a mid plate in our cars, the stock pilot bushings are just a little bit short, so it just adds a little bit more support to the input shaft of the transmission. So just a cool little trick I wanted to show everyone while I'm out here working. Hopefully I'll be getting the clutch and stuff thrown on soon, so that'll be nice, and we'll get closer and closer to putting this bad boy in. So I was just getting ready to throw the clutch on, and I was going through and cleaning up my flex plate. So we were on a flex plate when we were on a clutch, because actually the clutch itself has the pressure plate and basically the surfaces for the clutching all built into it, so you don't actually have a flywheel. So we use a flex plate, so they're a lot thinner. Anyway, I was going through it, you know, and checking it, you know, and I write down E for engine side and T for transmission, and basically that just tells you which side you mount it to. So this would be the side, the transmission side, point backwards the transmission, and part of that is these dimples. It's kind of hard to see on there, but they're dimpled the other way, and that has something to do with like when you're on a flex plate and how you mount the torque converter. But anyway, I was going through this and I was cleaning it up, and something kind of told me, you know, just check it over, you know, because it's a pain to replace these if you have to. You got to take the clutch off, and that's a pain in itself sometimes, but also having to do this in the race car, you got to take the transmission out, drive shaft out, like all that, unhook the linkages. It just gets to be a pain. Well, I was just going through this and looking, and I was inspecting all these welds. Well, I got around here to this weld here. Now if you can see up, there's a crack. You can kind of see where I can kind of open that gap up. And so this flex plate is basically junk because of that. And I don't know, something else that I noticed is where these dimples are. Some of them have raised edges, like this one doesn't. This one has a pretty big raised lip. This one has like a lip the other way. So I don't know if this got bent at one time or if it wasn't manufactured right. I think this is just a stock one that I bought. So I was going over some of my parts, and I found basically one that I've used before, and so I went through and was checking it, and it appears this one doesn't have any cracks in it, any of the welds. So I just basically need to clean it up just a little bit. I'm assuming the reason I took this out is I think at one time I was having starter engagement issues, and I think a couple of them teeth like that I thought was causing it, but actually I think it was because I had a bad starter. So I'm going to actually throw this one back on, and again, always label it. The dimple kind of points this way. You can see the indent on this side. So, and that's for like the bolt for the torque converter, I believe, and it kind of has a recess so it sits behind the ring gear. But yeah, so it just like this one's been sitting a while, I'll go through and I'll touch it up with some Scotch-Brite just to kind of clean up a little bit of the surface rust. Another thing I like to do is I'll take, and this thing, they have a little sharp raised edge. I think it's from the punching process. When you put this on, and when you press it on there, it like tightens that lip down, and sometimes it can be a pain to get back off. And the guy told me that if you knock that little raised edge down, it kind of helps keep it from seizing onto the end of the crankshaft, so it's a lot easier to pull off. It doesn't affect the centering much, you know, like I said, because you're not taking any of the inner bore off, you're just taking this top lip down. And that's because our clutches, when they tighten against this, they actually compress it onto the shaft, and it can be just a bear to get it off. So I'm gonna go clean this up real quick and I'll be right back. So we got done cleaning this up a little bit, and as I was saying before, when you clean up that little tiny like burr on there from the stamping, it's still snug. Like, it takes pretty good effort to actually move this. So you're not actually, you don't want to touch the bore of that actual flex plate. You only want to do just the actual side surface, taking that down just a little bit. And it doesn't have to be anything wild. I've done it with sandpaper before. I usually, as long as you're good with like a 90-degree sander, just touch it up real good. It don't have to be anything wild. It just helps so when you put your clutch on and it fits on this kind of radius of the crankshaft, it doesn't compress that little lip down. It kind of gives you a little bit of relief on that. So that way when you take it off, this thing doesn't sit there and rock back and forth and you gotta get 3 pry bars and 6 guys to help you undo it. Because I know everyone's probably been there at some point in their life trying to wrestle a flex plate off. So funny story about the flex plate. If my neighbor was over here, he'd bust my chops. So one time I put an engine together and I actually had an issue that I should have spotted it. But anyway, I was putting the flex plate, well, not the flex plate, but the clutch on. And down in there's a little gap between the engine block. And when I put my bolts in, these bolts here that hold the clutch on, I don't have the clutch yet, but when they thread in here, I noticed they were way too long. I couldn't figure out why. They were like bumping into the block. So I was like shimming them and trying to grind them down a little bit and trying all this stuff to figure out why it was not fitting right. And anyway, I finally got it figured out and put together. And I put the engine in and we were putting the starter on, or I was putting the starter on, and he kind of made a comment. He goes, "What's your starter gonna hit?" What do you mean, what's it gonna hit? Well, come to find out, I had put the clutch on without the flex plate, and without a flex plate, you can't start the car. So we had to actually take the engine all the way out of the car just to do that. And that's why, like I said, if you can check this ahead of time to make sure all the welds are good, that there's no damage, because fixing it when the engine's out of the car is way easier than having to do it in the car, yanking the engine out. Thank God at that time, for some reason I'd put the starter on pretty early in the process, so I didn't have to unhook a bunch of stuff. I think we still even had the lift plate still on it, so it wasn't that big of a deal to turn around. But to this day, he always gives me a hard time about making sure I got the flex plate installed. So that's kind of a funny story about that. So now I kind of make sure I check it and put it on, and then basically we put the clutch on and whatnot. So I'll show you the rest of that process here as we go. And then obviously when you're putting this on, I'm assuming they're all supposed to be lined up, but there's an extra hole in the crankshaft, extra hole in there's like a 7th hole, this little guy that's in between the holes. I line them all up. I've never been told that's not the way to do it. I don't know if there's supposed to be like a dowel pin in there at times, or maybe the older models had dowel pins, but that is something that I like to do just to make sure everything's lined up. Other thing, once I have a clutch on and I take it off, I will go through and mark the plates. I don't think I can see it here, but basically this is kind of your main friction surface. I can't think of the right word to call it, but basically this would be similar to the surface on an actual flywheel. If you ran a standard stock kind of transmission in any vehicle. But like I said, we use the flex plate. It's smaller, lighter weight for us. They're a little bit more probably robust. And then also like, I use a double disc. So basically there's 2 friction discs in there versus like your standard car would have a bigger flywheel. And that'd typically be a single disc, which I know some guys run those, and there's advantages and disadvantages to both. But you can even run a triple disc. I know a fellow buddy of mine that races, he runs basically the same size clutch that I do, and he does a triple disc, which definitely has a little more grab to it. It probably won't wear as much, but they're more expensive and they're more components that can wear out and fail, that kind of stuff. So it is, like I said, there's there's pros and cons to all of it, and yeah. And the main thing when you're running like this clutch and the flex plate, these bolts here, there's bolts that are meant for the flywheel, and there's bolts that are meant for the flex plate. And the ones for the flex plate are shorter. Even though we're using a flex plate, you want to use the ones that came off a vehicle or are meant for a flywheel, because they're actually longer, they're taller, so they actually can help go through this part of the clutch for us. So just something to keep in mind too, so you don't run short, you don't want anything to happen and break. It's a bad day. It can be a bad day when any of this stuff fails. Not only that you got to tear it apart to fix it, but I firsthand actually witnessed a guy that had a flex plate. I believe it was a flex plate, a little different design flex plate. It actually blew apart while racing. I was actually behind him, and I thought he blew up because there was sparks flying, and then it kind of let out a little bit of a smoke, and then he lost power. Well, what actually happened is the flex plate blew apart. It had a crack in it, and it broke, and a piece of the ring gear actually went underneath of his bell housing, away from him. Obviously we have to have bell housing that's 270 degrees enclosure on the top side, I believe. So the only opening you can have, the the extra 90 degrees of opening has to be kind of pointed down or away from the driver. Well, somehow his angled down, and it just hit perfect. It actually sheared the fuel line off, and he was actually gushing fuel out. And with the sparks that happened, he's just really lucky it didn't catch fire. And with that much fuel, running out right there, it could have been a bad day for him. And he actually thought it blew up too. So before we found that, it broke his fuel line and basically starved it from fuel, because it was no longer pumped to the engine. He actually got back into the pits and went to try and start it, and I could hear the starter winging, but it wasn't actually turning the engine over. And looked down and saw that the flex plate was broke, and then saw that the fuel line was disintegrated, actually sheared right in half. So he was extremely lucky on that one. It's always nice when you can kind of laugh something off like that. So then once you get those bolts in, I'm kind of a nerd, so I have an old engine book, because when I grew up, I didn't necessarily have a lot of access to guys that were building engines. So being the nerd I am, I bought a book on how to rebuild a small block Chevy. You can see I've thumbed through it plenty of times. I used it to build my first engine, and basically all of them afterwards. But in the back it has this nifty chart. Tells you the bolts, where they're commonly used, and what the foot pounds are. So like here, we're going to be using the 5/8 flywheel flex plate, 60 foot-pounds. So I'm going to get my torque wrench here. We're going to make sure those are torqued nice. Make sure that they don't fall off. This isn't necessarily standard practice, but you need to kind of hold the crankshaft from turning, and sometimes the best way to do it is kind of jam something in the actual flex plate. I don't have a fancy tool. As long as you don't get carried away, it shouldn't damage it. I usually use a pry bar or something. My pry bar is all in my trailer, so I do not have a pry bar available, so we will use this ball joint tool. And you just got to use what you got. And again, as long as you're gentle. And I would probably say never ever use an impact. I don't care how many Ugga Duggas you think your impact is calibrated at, but you'll be happy that you use a torque wrench. And I know some guys will swear up and down that you gotta have Mac or Snap-on torque wrenches digital. this torque wrench I've had for quite a while. I think I checked the calibration on a couple years ago. We have a calibrator at work, so I checked it, but it's just a cheapy click style, lock the handle. I think it was like 25 bucks at the time. I've had it for, I don't know, 15 years, but you know, they're not really super expensive. And then I like to just go around and check them all 2-3 times. Trust me, you know what, falling off, don't have to dig it apart, tear it apart to fix it. So also, when I do the clutch, there's some bolts that are held on that kind of hold it all together once you get the main base of the clutch on there. And then I have a sheet. We were on the, sorry about the bad lighting here. We were on the 7 1/4 V drive, and then you go down and clutch assembly bolt torque 22 to 24. So I think we can just set 23 or 25. Again, as long as you don't get too aggressive, it ain't the end of the world. So kind of what I was talking about before, I like to mark, just put a little line on everything. So when you take it apart, you know, you're kind of putting it back the same exact order. Obviously you need to use a clutch installation tool. Basically all it is a simulated end of the transmission. Just make sure you grab the one that matches. Be pretty careful about touching the friction material. Anytime you get like oil on them, they can cause them to wear out faster. They'll actually slip a little bit too. You can see this one's still pretty new. You can kind of see the circular pattern of how they ground it when it was new. I think we only have maybe 10 nights on this clutch, so it's doing really good. I'm not even going to check the thickness, but a lot of times you have to check the thickness of these kind of gold colored plates. You're supposed to check the thickness of the intermediate plates, I think they're called, or the separator plates. I can't quite think of what exactly they're called, but so yeah, just basically line it up and away you go. So once you're done torquing all your bolts around there, 6 of them, again, 22, 24 foot-pounds all it takes. They're tiny bolts, 3/8 sockets. So you want to make sure, kind of as you're doing this, that this kind of stays loose, so that way you can slide it in. You hopefully should be able to turn it any direction, and it should slide in just fine. Make sure your tester, well, there's a little tough spot there, but just something you want to make sure when you're putting your clutches together. You want to make sure it's aligned properly. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll go around and check and kind of feel for those discs to make sure they're kind of even all the way around. This one pretty good. So like I said, just check it. You want to make sure all them teeth are aligned. Again, just a simple tool. This is plastic. I've seen guys take like a jump 3-speed and they'll bob the end of it off. You want to make sure too that this is kind of clean, no spots of debris or anything like this. This does have a little nick on it that I've cut down. So just kind of something to keep in mind. I think that's pretty much it for what I got for throwing in the clutch. So nothing real wild. I did, like I said, I finally got the tool, figured I'd put it in. Yeah, and that takes off my old motor that got sent in to our engine builder, custom built. This actually is logo there, beside Algona, Iowa. This is not my motor. This is another guy's from town here that's racing this year. And yeah, he took my motor down when he was picking up his, and kind of in return for him taking my motor down, he's still working on getting heat in his garage, so he asked if we could just store it in here until he's ready to install it. I said, yeah, I guess I cleared a spot when I took the engine down, or had him take an engine down, so I figured why not have him head in here. And then he's pretty fresh, pretty new to the sport, so I'm able to give him as many pointers as I know. I'm no expert, but give him as much I can help, give him some shit along the way. So but yeah, he's got a good piece there. It's pretty similar to one of the other motors that I have. So again, we'll be starting off this year with this beast. I haven't quite come up with any names for my motors or anything like that. I know some people call them, you know, Thumper and Killer and whatever. Mine are just, I guarantee mine legal. So the tech man, they don't even have to tech it. They can just look at it, pass me through tech. So that'll be nice if I ever make it as tech. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe they're legal. That's why I don't make it as tech. Maybe I need to be illegal. No, I don't try and break the rules on purpose if I can help it. So sometimes we skate around the rules, sometimes we bend the rules, sometimes we interpret the rules how we need to. So that sometimes happens. But here's the other valve cover, and I run I believe these are Kevco valve covers. I've had really good luck with them. I think this is my 3rd year running them, so I haven't had any problems. It's kind of nice because they come with a little you can get a breather canister, sorry, for these. And basically you can have a remote breather. Sometimes I think like this motor over here has the two spouts on it for the breathers you put on it. I'm not a big fan of them breathers. To me, if you got anything sort of going on with your motor, maybe it's the rings aren't seated right or something's causing some extra blow by. They seem like they really push a lot of vapor out, and then also it tends to take a lot of oil with them, especially for guys that are maybe running a garage rebuild. I've been there. I've had engines that I've torn down, basically cleaned them in parts cleaner, shined them up with Scotch-Brite, new rings, new bearings, kind of the hand hone with the drill to get everything kind of so it'll break back in, just to get by. That's all I had a budget for. In my eyes, that's kind of what the sport should be about. The class we're racing in is guys doing something like that and still kind of being competitive. I was not competitive with mine. It probably needed a little more work and some more thought on parts we had in it, but it ran us quite a while. So now I'm able to kind of move up a little bit, and I got engines that are kind of built. I do some of my own assembly. I can put an engine together. I have instructions. I have an instruction book, so this guy has helped me out more than a couple times. I've gone through and just kind of verified stuff that I've read and remember doing, and obviously that's not quite performance base for the most part. It is a little bit older. I've had this one for 10-15 years too, so you know, it kind of talks about rebuild. You know, a lot of our stuff is for the most part fairly new. We do rebuild some of it, but and a lot of times it comes down to, I think for most guys, it's time consuming. You got to have a dedicated area and the tools, and kind of making sure you can clean and organized. And we've all seen my shop. I struggle with keeping things clean and organized, but like I said, I'm trying to cram like 5 gallons of water in a gallon jug. So I got a lot of stuff, and I just am running out of cupboards and hanging space and floor space, and I got engines and stuff that I need to get rid of. I got some engines on a package deal. This is a 400, I believe. I got a 350 one piece sitting over there that, you know, is just stock, needs to be rebuilt. I got a 400 block sitting back there that needs to be cleaned up, and hopefully it can be resalvaged. It doesn't do me any good in the class we run for racing, so the only reason I would maybe do anything with them is I got a Camaro that I putz around with. I need to get out and play with, and something like that might be an option for that. But if anyone knows a lot about racing takes up a lot of time. It is pretty much 20-hour days that you're thinking about it, dreaming about it, 6, even 7 days a week. You know, you can be thinking about it and getting ready for it. And I told a guy that commented on one of my videos on the Facebook side of things, he asked me how much time I dedicate to it. And basically it's 11 months out of the year for me. I do take usually a month off, kind of right after racing ends. We might tear stuff down, but then I'll usually take kind of a break, and it gets busy for our family with the kids and their activities and stuff. So it is tough to keep all this. And like I said, engine work's another thing that if you got to add on the list amongst the gazillions of other things that you got to do, it's sometimes just, it's hard to get the time to do that. And for how much money is in something, you know, so kind of small, and if you're not careful and can dedicate 100% focus to it, you can screw stuff up and wreck the whole thing or majority of it, and it's expensive. I've had one, actually no, I've had 2 motors I think blow up. Actually 3, I take that back. My first one was a bone stock 283, which wasn't quite legal for our rules, but it was the only thing I had available and the money for. Again, we did the garage, tear it down, rebuild it, kind of with whatever tools we had in the toolbox. Nothing, no machine shop stuff. And it ran pretty decent. I let another guy drive it, and he finished her off for me. He felt bad, but I think I had a whole whopping like $250 into this motor when it was done. And for probably what I made back in my winnings, so to speak, it was kind of the closest I've been to being almost money ahead on something like that. So I might even been money ahead on it, really, but but I've had some other ones blow up. And yeah, when it happens, depending on how it happens, you know, it's the cheapest one for me. I had a valve spring break or something. I dropped a valve, and basically I wrecked the piston, the rod, valve, springs. I need to work under the head. I don't think it damaged the block at all, so I was able to salvage most of it, and that was still $1,800. So again, just finding time to make sure you dedicate focus and not miss tightening something, misinstalling something, installing something wrong backwards. It can cause a bad day, especially, you know, some of us, you know, like this is my backup from last year that we have some nights on. It had a little issue, so we got that addressed. It stayed in the corner. We ran the other one that's actually at the engine builder now all last season. I think we put about 36 nights on it, 37 nights, which is about the most I've ever done in a year. So it definitely, I got my money's worth out of it for last year. It needs to be kind of freshened up a little bit, checked over. So that one had one night prior to, so that's quite a few nights, you know, on a motor, and you're getting up into that. It's all personal preference. Some guys will say 50 nights, some guys say 40, 45. So that one had a night the year before, and then 36 last year. Give or take with some tests and tunes, I think we got about 38 nights on it total. So it's getting there. So I just want to kind of get ahead of the game. You hate to just kind of run them until they expire if you can get more use out of them. I would love to take it and have it completely refreshened, you know, new rings and all that good stuff, but new bearings, it's just not quite my budget. So unfortunately, we'll have to gamble with making sure this one can run a while, save our pennies up, and hopefully get one of them rebuilt for the following year, and kind of keep one as a spare, and try and get on a 1-year cycle of rebuilding them. But this year we had some other things pop up, and we had vacation and stuff that I had to set some money aside for. But no, so I think that's all I'm gonna ramble on for tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed the video kind of showing how I install a clutch. Please, if you haven't already, like and subscribe, hit the bell in the corner for any sort of alerts. I appreciate anyone that has already subscribed and likes my videos. Feel free to leave a comment too. As of right now, I don't have many comments or any much for feedback, other than some people reach out, kind of private message. Let me know what you think. If there's things that you think I need to improve on. I watch it. I'm my biggest critic. There's a lot of things that I say and do that it drives me nuts when I see myself on video. So I'm trying to work on it. I'm trying to add some humor to it. It is kind of hard when it's just me. I try and be informative. But yeah, so I'm gonna quit rambling.